Hi everyone, Meteorologist Joel Curtis with your aviation weather for Wednesday, April 2nd. Starting out with the flying weather for Thursday morning, we're still going to have some low IFR conditions along the north slope with some fog in the polar easterly winds, some marginal VFR through Norton Sound, a little bit along the Alcan. That's just the trailing end of the weather system that has roared through the central interior over the last couple of days. And then along the Alaska Range, some marginal VFR, and then IFR extensive from Bristol Bay out to the Pribilofs and all across the Alaska Peninsula and into the eastern Aleutians. And then we also have some IFR and marginal VFR offshore for the Gulf. For Thursday afternoon, a lot of that IFR and marginal VFR goes away north of Norton Sound. Then we still have some marginal VFR along the Alaska Range and IFR all the way up to Nunivak Island, also Cape Romanzoff and into the Yukon Delta, as well as some IFR into Bristol Bay, all across the Alaska Peninsula, eastern Aleutians, and up against the Alaska Peninsula, as well as Kodiak Island, and then some IFR out into the Gulf. For now, Friday, as that weather system gets even closer from the south, we've got IFR reforms of the North Slope and also an area in the Chukchi Sea. Lots of IFR along the Alaska Range, all the way up through Norton Sound and up to the Seward Peninsula as well. IFR extensive over the eastern Bering Sea, down through the eastern Aleutians, all across the Alaska Peninsula, and then also up against the Kenai Peninsula and parts of Kodiak Island as well. And then for Friday afternoon, as the system gets even closer, a frontal band aloft expands on up to the North Slope, covering a lot of the Brooks Range into Kotzebue Sound, Norton Sound, and then all across the eastern Bering Sea, down through the eastern Aleutians, IFR for much of the Gulf of Alaska, including up into Prince William Sound, marginal VFR in Cook Inlet, IFR along the western Alaska Range, and then some IFR creeping into the Fairweather Range as well. So let's go through our past reports. For Anaktuvik, marginal VFR becoming VFR in the afternoon. Same thing for Anakin, marginal VFR becoming VFR in the afternoon. For Lake Clark and Merrill, we've got the marginal VFR all day and expecting some turbulence in the afternoon in that area. For Rainy Pass, marginal VFR. Windy Pass, marginal VFR. Isabel Pass, marginal VFR. Mentasta Pass will hold at VFR. And then for Tahitna Pass, VFR, but it's only a gap with some downslope in there because of marginal VFR also to the north and the south of the pass. For Portage, marginal VFR, I'm expecting some turbulence in that area with about 30 knots of surface wind or so. For Chilkoot and White Pass, VFR, some really good flying weather up there. So for our freezing levels Thursday morning, we've got an area of the surface, but there'll be some temperature inversions in southern Alaska with about 2,000 foot second freezing level, and then ramping up to almost 8,000 feet as you get well south into the Gulf of Alaska. So what does that do for our icing? So we have some really extensive icing with this weather system coming up. Freezing level to flight level 120, considerable moderate. On the east side, we have freezing level to about 8,000 that's affecting the Gulf Coast and a little bit on up into the Eagle area in the upper Yukon. But note that far to the south, it gets worse and worse, and there should be isolated severe well south of the Alaska Peninsula, but in the center of that really strong weather system that's coming up. So for our jet stream, lots of branches of the jet stream today. So we've got a southwesterlies becoming westerlies on up to 125 knots as you get over the Brooks Range or so. a little bit of southerlies out ahead of that weather system in the southern Gulf. But note the westerlies and northwesterlies up to 145 knots, dipping down into the Pacific from the far western Aleutians. For our 9,000-foot winds on Thursday, we've got southwesterlies, and it's going around that upper ridge of high pressure. You can see the high center south of Haida Gwaii and off of Vancouver Island. So then those become southeasterlies as you get more influence from the weather system that's coming up. You note the low that I put in. It's actually a little further south, but I wanted to indicate it on the map for you, because what we've got is southeasterlies, and they start ramping up to about 55 knots or so, and then they make that anticyclonic or around the high pressure curve on up into the central interior. In the meantime, look at those northerlies. You're starting out at about 35 knots, ramping up to about 45 as you get south of the eastern Aleutians. And then for our 3,000-foot winds, and that's our turbulence maker, I've got about 30 knots over Cook Inlet, which is going to account for the turbulence in Portage Pass, up to 55 knots through Kennedy Entrance, and then the circulation around the low. Check out those northerlies that are going across Dutch Harbor up to about 65 knots or so on the west side of that system as it comes up. So that means for our turbulence, we've got a large area of isolated moderate from about, let's say, Ruby or so, on down into the Gulf of Alaska, and then all across the eastern and central Aleutians. But note, it's really starting to ramp up with this system moving up, because we've got considerable moderate that goes through Kennedy Entrance, also affecting Kodiak Island, also the eastern Aleutians, and then we're going to have isolated severe the further that you get out into the Gulf of Alaska or the Pacific Ocean. And that'll be surface to about 10,000 feet, and then it ramps downward as you get further north to surface to about 4,000 feet or so. So that's it for your aviation weather. Please, please, please file a flight plan and fly really safe out there. Thank you.